Oh, bigger.
Welcome back to another episode with Fight Night Picks. As always, we're brought to you by SimBody. Vertiball is now SimBody. If you head on over to their website, simbody.com, you're going to get all the great products that you know and love, including the SimBody Vertiroller and the Vertiball that you have seen most likely here in studio. Look at that. Place it, lock it, attach it, Vertiball, all sorts of great stuff over there if you want to roll out those old tired muscles and you don't want to go with that old lacrosse ball. They're also coming out with that very new product that you can see right in front of you. And if I head on over to my cart, look at that. I've already got a Vertiball over there. Little bit of a deal right there. And if you hit the try for 60 days risk-free, use the promo code FNP, you're going to get 20% off your order with that code FNP at simbody.com. You're really, really helping out another local company here in New Brunswick, Canada. Can't wait for it. The new name, SimBody at simbody.com. And as we always say, let's get into it. And welcome back to the last episode with Fight Night Picks Kicks this Saturday, UFC Vegas 45. And if you haven't checked it out already, fightnightpicks.com, all sorts of great stuff over there. And even during the quote-unquote off-season, we'll have some great content over on the site as well. Maybe you want to check out our own Joshua Hart's full card betting guide for today. What's he feeling? Apparently Leavitt, Gamrot, and Thompson, his pop and popcorn fights, all sorts of great stuff over there, including the store. And listen, you can check out some of the gear that the boys wear on the show, including those long sleeve logo shirts, the Under Armour hats, and of course, those red Under Armour t-shirts. All this and more over on the website, fightnightpicks.com. And as we always say, let's get into it.
Last look at the big card. Be sure to head into the chat and have your say. Let's get into it and join in Fight Night Picks ? Kicks.
The best part was I muted myself. I muted myself in two different ways, Matt. We already had, a super chat up there. There was questions about a shoey. There was questions about, some hot sauce. But listen, hey, Chuck Barkley, he is the latest part of the show. And it's always a great way to start the last show of the year that way. Now, I have my poutine. I have my Poirier's hot sauce. Maybe there's some hot sauce connections in the works. What do I know? Enough. But when I look at this one, Matt, I absolutely love this card. And Kyle the Doc says, tell us about your dog. Yes, Chuck Barkley, he's a golden retriever. He's going to be a part of the show. Matt, I absolutely love this card. That's enough about Chuck, and let's talk a little bit more. We have Derek Lewis taking on Mr. Chris Daukaus, brother of Kyle. And when I look at this card, obviously it's unfortunate that Barcelos and Victor Henry, that fight falls out. Seems like Victor Henry, some COVID issues on his end, but it was quickly rebooked for January 15th, so we do get that fight. But Matt, I absolutely love this card, just the way it is. The one thing I have to say, it's just really unfortunate that there was a lot of unprofessional bull, you know what?
There was.
Because there were so many weight misses. I mean, first heavyweight ever to miss weight, 267, was Justin Tafa. It's absolutely insane.
I know I'm a big basketball guy, so I'll put this into basketball terms. Remember when Ben Simmons in that 7-game series against the Atlanta Hawks only took 2 shots in all the fourth quarters combined? You almost have to try to do that. You almost have to try to not make the heavyweight limit. Tim Sylvia is the last guy I can remember who had a fight canceled just because medically they were like, listen, you're not able to cut the weight to get down to the heavyweight limit. I'm sure it's happened on other occasions too, but it is ridiculous. Heavyweight is one of the few divisions where we don't really ask fighters to starve themselves throughout fight camp and make all their sacrifices that we ask those other weight classes too. And I always go back to Paul Felder when he fought RDA over the summer. He barely even trained MMA for a whole entire year. He was just getting ready for a triathlon. He wasn't really looking after his weight. And on 6 days notice, he cut a tremendous amount of weight. And it was really, really like unhealthy for him too. But he still made it. He was still professional. He still showed up, and he still put on a really good performance, all things considered. We look for those things for those high-level athletes, and when Justin Tafa's not willing to make those sacrifices, I guess it really is unfortunate. But there's a lot of other great fights in the card, and just to sort of throw, I guess, or give flowers to another fighter who's sort of at the opposite end of the spectrum. There was a stat that came out. Cub Swanson, throughout his whole entire cherished MMA career, has never once missed weight, never had a PED violation, never any controversies. Like, it is nice that some people still show up to fight week well prepared and just ready to go.
The only controversy he has is that we need 3 fights, Matt, before we can actually talk about this stuff. But when we look at this, Matt, Clay is saying over there in the comments section, Sijara was short notice, but I'm not at all surprised Chiasson missed. She was on short notice too, only 10 days for her, but it was odd because at the start of the week we were under the assumption it was going to be a bantamweight, then they moved it to featherweight, then Chiasson misses anyway. So Matt, as everybody knows, with Fight Night picks, we're going to flip it on over to the Fight of the Night screen, and we've got a really, really interesting couple of fights that we have picked out.
We do.
Oh, and I hit the fight companion. What is this show coming to?
Wow.
Puppy Chuck, he's not around. Listen, he brings the show together. But Matt, when we're looking at this one, we have the man himself, Cub Swanson, and we have Darren Elkins. And when we look at this fight, how could it not be Fight of the Night? I mean, Cub Swanson, he's a walking bonus machine. It's like Charles Oliveira last weekend. For Darren Elkins, never really a performance bonus guy, but in his last 2 fights, the win over Garagori, the win over, holy smokes, Derek Minner, where he just kind of blew him right out of the water.
He really did. And with Elkins, he's aged sort of like a fine wine. Maybe not one of the top shelf wines, but he has aged quite well for a guy whose nickname is The Damage. Like, you would expect him now to get hit and just kind of go down with one shot, but he's a very, very smart fighter. I know, again, the nickname wouldn't really suggest that, but he's found a way to really implement his pace, his ground and pound, and now he fights more to his strengths, I feel like, than he ever has in his career. But on the opposite side, like you said, every time Cub Swanson steps into that cage, he's one of those double bonus threats. He could win Fight of the Night and Knockout of the Night or Performance of the Night now in the same fight every single time he's out there, so I really don't know how this fight could not deliver.
And listen, it could happen. 21 saying this is definitely Fight of the Night for me. I gotta go in the distance, and both men will go to war, and it could happen. 21, you're right now in our Instagram story at Fight Night Picks. So listen, that should be a great fight. Our second pick, Diego Ferreira taking on Mateusz Gamrot. Absolutely love this fight because is it in with the new, out with the old, so on and so forth. You look at it for Diego, makes weight this time. That's great to see. Last fight out, he weighed in at 160.5. Had a great first round against Gregor Gillespie. Got finished in the second round. That was a Fight of the Night. I do like this one, though, because for Gamrot, obviously his training partner wasn't able to get the win last weekend in Dustin Poirier, but Dustin doesn't have Mateusz's instincts, and he doesn't have the grappling that the Polish fighter does here.
He certainly doesn't, but isn't that the great thing about being someone like Mateusz Gamrot at American Top Team? Like, we don't talk about you training with people who you might have heard about on a Bellator card. Like, no, he trains directly with guys like Dustin Poirier and Jorge Masvidal week in, week out. That's going to make you a better fighter in the long term, and that's a great thing for Gamrot, just a great resource for him to have at his disposal. I thought this fight got a lot more interesting yesterday, though, because I was concerned about Diego's weight cut and just how he was going to look tonight. And I did put a lot of stock into his botched weight cut being a big reason for why his cardio failed him in his last matchup. So I think this fight got a lot more interesting. If we get a more, I guess, a Diego with more gas in the tank this time out than he did against Gregor Gillespie, this could be a wild 3-round affair.
And for Ian Toomey saying Elkins looks like a bouncer in the Divius bar in Bangor, Maine, I think it's more like Skowhegan. He looks like a Skowhegan guy. So Matt, when we look at this card, as you know, as always with Fight Night Picks, question mark kicks, we go from the bottom of the card all the way back up to the top if there's any switches of the picks. And like I said, there was already 3 different fighters to miss weight, and we'll talk about those. We'll go back up to the top. We'll offer up a question mark kicks parlay, and everybody says, did I miss it? Am I here now? What happened? We recap it at the end of the show, as you always know. So if you want to toss us a like, it would definitely be appreciated. If we get to the goal of 500, I am going to douse my smoked poutine that definitely does actually exist, and a little bit of hot sauce. Chow down on it and enjoy this card. So Matt will go all the way from the top to the bottom. We have Jourdain Leavitt taking on Matt Sayles, and for Sayles, he's been out for pretty well 2 years now. He talked about it in an interview with JHK. He said, listen, I was up to 250 pounds. Then I got a little bit of intel in the DMs that was, well, maybe I over-exaggerated a little bit. I didn't get to that, but I was pretty heavy. And then really using my own insight, I guess, I listened to another interview with Sportskeeda by Frank Bonanda where Sayles, it was garbled, but said he weighed 208 pounds. That's what it sounded like to me. Either way, he went way up in weight. And then he came way back down, but this still isn't his natural weight class. He is a featherweight. Now, he's coming into this fight, Matt Sayles is, with, I'd say, a full head of steam, but not so much. I mean, his 3 UFC fights, he's 1-2. He was a favorite in every single fight. He was a favorite in the fight he fought Bryce Mitchell in, where he got twistered. First takedown for Mitchell. Bam. Down onto the mat. High crotch single leg. Jourdain Leavitt's bread and butter specialty. So, if you like Leavitt, maybe he's able to use that wrestling offensively to get Sayles down to the mat. However, Sayles is shown to be a pretty darn good wrestler, and Bryce Mitchell is the creme de la creme. If I'm not mistaken, who's he taking on in his next fight?
Isn't it like Edson Barboza?
It is Edson Barboza.
That's going to be a wild fight.
Answer my own question. So when I look at this one, Clay's saying he cashed out on Bryce. It could happen. 21 saying Leavitt by sub. And yeah, I mean, we go up and down through this one. But Matt, this is such a tricky one. Sharif is saying Leavitt I got in a parlay. And Timothy above is saying I've got Sayles. Dolphins fan saying Leavitt submission. Matt, you're a Dolphins fan. Is this you?
It is not. Now, hopefully they can finally become 500 if they beat the Jets. That'd be really nice. Then a bye week last week. It'd be nice. Good things are happening in Miami for once. Back to the fight, though. This will be a really interesting one, because like you said, even if Matt Sayles did over-exaggerate how much he weighed in those interviews, I'm still concerned about him not being in his natural weight class his first time back, because that does suggest to me that he did let himself go a little bit too much. Because, listen, a lot of fighters do weigh an unnatural amount, if you will, in between fight camps. They let themselves go. But then we still see them actively compete in the same weight class time in, time out. Like, Max Holloway gets pretty heavy in between fight camps. He still makes 145 pounds every time he goes out there. Now, I'm not really comparing Max Holloway to Matt Sayles, but you get the idea. Like, he really would have had to let himself go for him to think, hey, let me do sort of a practice weight cut, if you will, down to 155 pounds, make sure my body's good, and then I'll think about continuing my career down at 145 if all is good. I do worry about him in the grappling department, and it was like you mentioned, he is a good wrestler himself, but it's one of those cases where he's a slightly worse wrestler than Leavitt, I think, but he is the much better striker. So if his wrestling defense can win out during this fight, then he should be able to put together some success on the feet. But I do think the big key is, like you mentioned, that single leg takedown is the bread and butter of Jourdain Leavitt, and I think Matt Sayles is going to have a very, very hard time defending that.
Listen, for Jourdain Leavitt, his teammate Roxanne Modafferi recently getting engaged last night, so that's pretty cool, and you always see her and Serena De Jesus and the others from Syndicate in the IG of Jourdain Leavitt. Now, when I look at this one, and listen, the Bangor Maine connection, I see now Caleb Hall's training over at Syndicate. Ooh. He's another guy over there, state champion wrestler when he was in high school, and a really good fighter to watch out for. I've seen a number of his fights live. Definitely pay attention to it. But when I look at this fight, Matt, I mean, for me, Matt Sayles, very, very good striker. So we can kind of talk about the wrestling, but we got to focus on his strengths. And a lot of people said, you guys really gave him his flowers. I thought we did. Sayles open to plus 185. He's a plus 110 right now. For Leavitt, open to minus 220. He's minus 132. This one doesn't appear for some reason in our Instagram story, because sometimes when you post a bunch of pictures at the same time, Instagram gets squirrely. But over on Tapology, 2,560 total votes, 85% Leavitt, 66% by submission. Todd hitting us up in the super chat. And leaders in Meh? What about Leader of Men? That's a good Nickelback song off one of their first albums. And It's a Lifestyle saying Happy Holidays, FNP, fam. And Sean McMinn hit us up in the super chat as well. So it's all appreciated. But I want to talk about this fight. Drew Ma's saying, enlighten me, boys. Keep this off a parlay. Here's why. The unknown of Matt Sayles staying away. No, he had the knee injury. There was a child born. He has a son now. That's pretty cool. But for me, Matt Sayles is a good striker. Jourdain Leavitt is a poor striker. Jourdain Leavitt is a good wrestler. Matt Sayles has decent takedown defense, but I favor Jourdain Leavitt in this one based on the activity, but that's about it. I really do not like his striking. It's awkward.
It is.
And it's not just funny to say it's awkward. Defensively, it's a lot of sticking your elbows out there. It's the Anthony Smith up against the cage, but we're in the middle of the cage and we're actively fighting.
I was going to say, there's different kinds of awkward. Like, Yair Rodriguez is kind of awkward, but in the best way possible. Jourdain Leavitt is very stiff.
MMA. I get it. That's a good one. There we go.
But I do agree. Leavitt does have very wonky striking form, and I do worry about him. Like, I can't imagine Jourdain Leavitt ever fighting someone like a Mateusz Gamrot, and they are in the same division. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of the separation I see between him and the legit borderline top 15 guys right now. So I do feel like whoever does win this fight is still going to need a lot of work in their MMA career.
We're going to try and not let this one go way off the rails, but Todd, you'll appreciate it. I have a skater who's going to skate mug today. So Matt, we'll move on to our next fight. We have Don'Tale Mayes taking on Josh Parisian. And listen, I don't know about being on the right or wrong side of history with some of these picks. Oh, wait, I do with the Nunez's and so on and so forth. But when I look at this fight, I took the big underdog at the start of the week. And for Josh Parisian, he comes in here fit and ready, makes weight. And for Don'Tale Mayes, same deal. So for Parisian taking on Mayes, it's funny because when I think of my mind's eye, Don'Tale Mayes, when he's on, his boxing's great, his combinations are great, his output's very good. When I look at the numbers, Josh Parisian has higher output, but they fight in totally different styles. So you can't just look at the numbers. For Parisian, he's an old style swang and bang and rough you up against the cage and try and take you down and so on and so forth. He is the definition of 2008 heavyweight. He's the heavyweight that would go out there and think, man, I want to be Randy Couture. That's Josh Parisian. For Don'Tale Mayes, again, trained a lot with John Jones. He had Christian Edwards to train with for this camp because John is, well, over in Arizona now. So when I look at this one for Mayes, he has a very good opportunity. For both these guys, their only wins in the UFC are over Roque Martinez, 0-3 in the UFC. So you got to kind of pick and choose a little bit here. Paul Pierce with the shot saying Parisian. Remember that time they wheeled Paul Pierce out there in the wheelchair and then they wheeled him back?
They did.
Remember that one?
Had to do number 2. It happened.
Kiko Sijara saying Parisian by sub for sure. And Hype MMA saying I can't get a read on Parisian, with Timothy saying Mayes, I think. So what are we saying in this one?
This might be confirmation bias, but I do appreciate how many of our commenters do seem to be going with Parisian right now, because we did both have the underdog at the start of the week, and I gotta be honest, I did have to reflect a little bit and think, okay, how is Parisian probably going to get this done? And I do agree 100% with what we said at the start of the week. Like, if he can just put the pressure on Don'Tale Mayes, don't give him the range to really let go with his strikes, I think he can make this one of those boring heavyweight matchups, and he should be able to win it. Now, this is one of those weird matchups, because both guys are kind of fighting for their careers. When you're both only known for your one win over a guy who himself never had a win in the UFC and was gone, 3 fights into his career, both guys really, really do need this win. But I do like Parisian. I just think he's going to be able to be the more active guy on the in-betweens. Now, could he win 2.5 rounds in this fight, get hit by a big left hook in the 3rd round, and fall down face first? Of course he could. That's MMA. That's the sport that we deal with. But I do like Parisian to at least be the more consistent guy minute after minute, hour after hour.
Don't act way too strongly about this fight. That's all I can say, because they're low-level heavyweights that both have a win over a guy that's 0-3 in the UFC. Like, you're not going to see a big title run anytime soon for either one of these guys. They likely need 3 or 4 wins to even break the rankings. So I wouldn't feel overly strongly about this one. But when you look at this one in terms of the odds, when I see something being this close, Parisian open a plus 120s, plus 160. You see Don'Tale Mayes opens a minus 140s, minus 189 right now. Again, Clay summarizes it up perfectly. Not in the fact that we sold him on Parisian, but still couldn't bring himself to bet on it. Yeah, I would stay away from this one too. Matthew Buchanan, sloppy heavyweight split decision. It very well could be, but yeah, I don't have the highest of confidence in either one of these guys.
Not at all.
This is the one that somebody teehees
So
about.
both still with Parisian, though?
Yeah, still a Parisian in this one. Matt, so our next fight was the first one on the card that we were split on. So, sorry.
I rocked.
Before the video, you seemed like you were going to take Macy Chiasson.
Yes.
And I did pick Raquel Pennington. You picked Pennington in the video. So that's the behind the curtains. Now, Bundle of Humble hitting us up in the super chat. And listen, he's loving it. He's having a good time. So I appreciate that. I really want to get into the nuts and bolts of this fight. So I apologize if I didn't spend enough time.
Thank you, Bundle of Humble. That was very nice of you.
Thank you very much. Macy Chiasson comes in here on 10 days' notice. The fight we assumed was going to be at 135, but that was the wrong assumption. That's our fault. It was actually scheduled at 145. Chiasson comes in here weighing 148.5 and has me scratching my head more than the fact that Deron Williams and Frank Gore are now going to be in an exhibition. I mean, Chris Mannix wants to get to the bottom of it, but Chris can't. So when I look at this fight, Matt, for Chiasson, she's a very good striker when it's at range. And if you want to go see a classic Chiasson fight where she's able to kind of push away some of the wrestling and establish her own game, is when she fought Marion Renault. Chiasson looked great in that fight. I was slightly worried for her in that one. Macy looked great. Pennington has the type of style where she can just make it boring and win a good fight. And she did that in her last time out against Pannie Kianzad, who I saw in a Pannie interview, like she had a bad eye injury in that fight. So credit where it's due, talk about it as you will. But in this fight, I bet, and I just bet, and this is just us talking, I bet over in the comments section a lot of people say Pennington. So Ethan is saying Pennington decision, she's durable enough to grind it out. Rob Lawrence is in the chat. He is the hot sauce king. He'd love to see that hot sauce, but only at 120 likes, Rob. So you got to pop that one up there.
You do.
So, Matt, we're looking at this one. Clay's saying heavy on Pennington at 135, now at 145, a little bit of doubts. Still has Pennington. So what are you saying in this one, Matt? Because this is another one that now all of a sudden, if you had any certainty, you can throw that one away.
This is going to be another one of those moments versus momentum kind of fights where Pennington should be winning until she's not. And it will be really interesting because we've seen Chiasson struggle with fighters like Pennington. We've seen her struggle with the likes of Lena Landsberg. What does Lena do? She gets into the clinch. She can smother your range, throw those great elbows on the inside. And if she needs to, go for that offensive takedown and get some really good top control. Who does that sound exactly like? Well, that's Raquel Pennington. Raquel Pennington got to a title shot off of those principles, which basically tells you all you need to know about her. And the weird thing about Pennington is that she's never going to get the respect she deserves for just being a consistent and steady fighter, because it's not the greatest thing to watch, if we're all being honest. Like, we tell it like it is here. Some fighters are very, very exciting, and they're not great. Charles Jourdain might be a good example of that, where, hey, do I get excited to watch him fight? Of course I do. But when I envision his future, do I think he's going to be like a top 6, top 5, top 4 guy? I mean, not right now. Maybe he's going to prove something different to
That
me
new
today.
tattoo, you never know.
Exactly, but you get the idea. With Pennington, it might not be the most visually pleasing to watch, but it does get results. And I always go back to the Holly Holm fight because that was a very, very close fight. And I remember being on Twitter the night of that fight and everyone, oh, this is terrible, it's bad. And it wasn't a great fight, but when Holly Holm gets people into the clinch, she can normally just completely outmuscle them, get them up against the cage, and it's a no contest from that point on. Pennington was at least able to stay competitive in some of those positions, and I think that's really going to pay off at this weight class because Holm herself is a huge 135er, a borderline 145er, so I think the physicality is somewhat similar between Holm and Macy, and I think Raquel, since she had that previous fight, is going to be able to learn a lot from it.
So I want to give a little bit of, a breakdown. There's a couple commenters out there. Homeless in America is one of them, and then there was one earlier up, and I got to get it. It was you Master saying, no way Macy wins. She missed weight. And for Homeless in America saying 5'11", she should have been a featherweight all along. She won the Ultimate Fighter featherweight. The only trouble is, who are you going to fight? Danielle Wolf, who's 1-0. Like, Felicia Spencer's gone now. Nunes is your champ for now. So we'll see what happens. And listen, Macy Chiasson was supposed to have a couple of different fights with Aspen Ladd. One fell out because she had a foot injury. That was this past summer. Then they were supposed to fight, in the last 2 months? That one fell out because Ladd missed weight. So now we get this fight here. Kudos to Pennington for still taking the fight. When we look at it, Matt, in terms of the odds, it's a little bit of an interesting one because Pennington opened a minus 300. She's a minus 161 right now. Macy Chiasson opened a plus 250. She's a plus 134. Wow. So, Matt, in terms of a pick, this is another one that I don't necessarily feel married to. I still have Pennington. You try and hold on to it. Sometimes it happens.
Is it fair to say this is the female Johnny Hendricks versus Matt Brown? Because Macy kind of fights like Matt Brown. That's always been the comp that I think about in my head. Very rangy strikers. They sort of lunge for it with their jab and their straight shots. They use the elbows in tight. That's just always sort of my comparison for Macy. But I do think Raquel can just crash that distance, close the space, and make it a boring fight. We've seen her do it before. I think she can do it again. If she does need the offensive takedown, I think she'll be able to get it, because the thing about Macy is that when she's in the top position, she herself has great ground and pound. She's not a bad grappler, but defensively, she does leave a lot to be desired. So I think if Pennington, especially if Pennington can get it to the ground, will be able to win.
Bert hitting us up in the super chat. Bert, I agree with you. Does
Yes.
this go to decision, fellas? I would think it would. I mean, I would be surprised. Then again, cardio.
If Macy can land like a big elbow on the inside, maybe, but that's the big thing. Only Macy really possesses the potential for the finish. I don't know when Pennington's last finish was, but the only one that comes off the top of my head is her choking out Ashley Evans-Smith like years ago. And Ashley Evans-Smith isn't even like a natural 135er, so it's not like she has the highest likelihood to get a finish win herself.
Bulldog choke at 4:59 of the first round. That was UFC 181, Hendricks versus Lawler 2. Probably the coolest fight poster you'll ever see.
That was cool.
There is that one. Yeah, I've got Pennington, but again, in this one, I mean, Chiasson can crack. She was getting ready for a similar fight in Aspen Ladd earlier on this year, a couple different times. So for me, it is what it is. I mean, if you feel strongly about this one, then go.
I'll say this: I like Pennington a lot at the start of the week, but I'm a lot closer to the middle now, especially this being at 145 and it being closer to Macy's natural weight class.
All right, Matt. We move on to our next fight. We have.
Oh my goodness.
Our Canadian here, Charles Jourdain. I mean, listen, I've got there's a Roots logo here somewhere. Matt's got the Canadian. I've got the Smokes Poutine. We're all ready to go. For Charles Jourdain, he doesn't look like that anymore because now he has like a samurai tattoo that goes up onto his neck. It's the most interesting thing I've ever seen. He looks upset. He looks like he needs a win. UFC Canada did some interviews with him, so that was a little bit different. So we look at this one, Matt, and Paul Pierce, one of the greatest of all time Celtics, is saying, let's go Charles. He's taking on Andre Ewell. Now, here's the trouble. In Charles Jourdain's last fight, he was having tons of success against a really tricky fighter in Julian Erosa, a guy who, when his chin's on, maybe he could beat a top 15 fighter. I actually think that he could. But when I look at this fight, Matt, it's so weird because for Andre Ewell, needs a win. It's probably going to be like a make or break. It's like we had Dusko Todorovic and Maki Pitolo. I don't know if you saw, Maki got cut. So this is one of those fights for Andre Ewell. For Shao, the trouble is he had that giant win over Doo-Ho Choi in Busan where, listen, like
that was a star-making performance.
It was a star-making performance, and now you're still a big deal. Now, sometimes big deals burn out. Sometimes Kevin Lee signs with Eagles FC.
Lando Venata.
Charles Jourdain could be one of those guys. But when I look at this one, Master is saying Ewell gonna get the upset, and Kay saying 100 minutes until fight night, but we're here now. AG Jourdain feeling... I gotta finish it. KO despite the 6-inch reach disadvantage. And Matt hitting us up in the super chat
Matt.
Saying, I'm back, boys.
You're a real one.
Love you guys. Matt, we certainly appreciate you. So, Matt, I look at this one. Again, William, whose comment was hidden because he cursed, and Alex, whose comment because he cursed. But when we look at this one, Matt, Jourdain does not deal with pressure very well.
He doesn't.
It's going to be who establishes it quickly. For Andre Ewell, though, he's the type of guy that can bounce in and out with his long range. He's got to keep it going forward.
He does, but that's not really in his nature. And that's what I always go to when I try to break this fight down. Look at what both guys' weaknesses are, and then let's compare them against each other. Jourdain struggles with guys who can out-pressure him, who do his strengths against him. Exactly, who can make him move backwards. Andre Ewell doesn't really do that. Andre Ewell's very happy to sort of wait for the fight to come to him. Now let's look at what Ewell struggles with. He can't take leg kicks very well, like at all. He gets hurt by them. He doesn't check them. And he's been hurt to the body before. And what we've mentioned a lot on this channel is that Charles Jourdain has one of the better southpaw kicks to the body in the whole of the UFC. So Andre Ewell already has two weaknesses that Jourdain immediately can take advantage of. And I think he will over and over and over again. And the thing about Jourdain is that everything he does sort of mixes together. He goes to the leg, he goes to the body. Those hopefully open up the headshots. I think that's going to happen in this fight.
Matt, it's his cat's birthday. It's a cat's birthday. We debut the latest.
Happy birthday, Hans.
We debut the newest member of Fight Night Picks. You know him as Chuck Barkley. So yeah, Chuck hanging out.
So fun fact, the first pet that I remember us ever getting growing up is a cat named Garfield. We got him when I was 4 years old. He's still alive and I'm 23. So... nothing wrong with a cat.
Sometimes Garfield still kicks. He's about half the size he used to be, but he's still kicking. So, Matt, when we look at this fight, Raw Torque saying Canada bias, a little bit LOL.
We never pick Canadians, and I kind of feel bad about it.
Yeah, it's a little weird. So, happy birthday to Hans the Cat. Now, Matt, when we look at this fight and we're trying to make a pick, Andre Ewell, again, boxing, volume, good head movement. Most times, but ground game sometimes, and the trouble is with Andre Ewell, and we could say this in other fights, but not this one, he gets held on his back way too often, but I don't see that one happening here.
Marlon Vera violated him on the mat, and it was really, really bad. Like, there's no other way to describe it. He got him in one of those, like, head and arm, but we're standing chokes, just slammed him on the ground, and then absolutely went to town on him. I just worry about Ewell defensively in most situations. Off his back, is he very good? Not really. On his back foot, yes, he can counter with that one big shot, and maybe he can catch Jourdain on the way in, but I do think that if Jourdain can work the body and work the legs early, it's going to open up a big shot later on in the fight.
I'm going to go first leg of the question mark kicks parlay with Charles Jourdain. Last weekend didn't hit, and the confidence level this week, it's shaken. I got to be honest, it's shaken. I want to win the trophy this year, but yeah, I'm going to go with Jourdain. Minus 200, that's the way to go. Laos Non saying Canadians not doing so well, waiting for Malott to storm the field, and I can't wait for Malott. Listen, Team Alpha Male, let's go. But yeah, going with Charles Jourdain in this one.
This is a borderline fight of the night contender, though. I think we can both agree on that.
Yeah, we had to say that at the start of the week. So we'll move on, Matt, to our next fight. Sijara Eubanks and Melissa Gatto. Now, Matt, this is another one. So you and I split the difference on Pennington and Chiasson, but not really. So this was one of those ones, and I have them written out. We had Eubanks, Gatto, we were split on, Tafa, Hunsucker, Lewis, Daukaus. Those were the three that we were actually legitimately split on this week. Listen, MMA Lock of the Night wants you, apparently, so go for that one. He wants to box you. I'd love to see that. I think there'd be...
No, this is my promise to anyone on YouTube for anything. If anyone out there with any sort of influence is watching, I'll beat you in one-on-one basketball, and I'll break your ankles while I do it. I won't box anybody, but if you think you can block my shot, I'll look like Kevin Durant. There you go.
One-on-one, you want to hit the ice with me? No chance. No chance whatsoever. Now, we look at this one. We have Eubanks taking on Melissa Gatto. And it's a bit of a clash of styles, but not really when you look at the nuts and bolts, because for Sijara Eubanks, can she power punch? 100%. She has very good boxing coming out of Nick Cantone MMA. You're going to get some of the best training that you can. Unfortunate that a former teammate just retired this week, and Claudia Gadelia. But Matt, when we look at this one, for Eubanks, very good wrestler. And we say it every time. We got to stop saying it. Underrated grappler, because
she's just a good grappler.
She is a very, very good grappler, very well-rounded. Dylan O'Neill is saying Eubanks by dominant decision. So I want to hear what people have to say on this one. MPTV saying, take a chance with Gatto, Matt. Now,
I did last time out, and it worked.
Sarge weighed in at 127.5 for 125. What are you doing, Sarge? I mean, Matt, like, we look at this fight, and for Eubanks, she misses. But for Melissa, she makes it. So what are we saying when we're looking at this one here?
I've long said that the only thing keeping Sijara Eubanks from a title shot at 125 pounds is Sijara Eubanks. Not a single person at 125 pounds has been able to defend her takedown, absorb her strikes, really just have a competitive fight with her at this weight class. She blows the doors off of everybody, but every single time they give her a big opportunity, or every single time that, at least I think she sort of put it all together and is finally going to go on that big run, something happens. Either she falls out due to an injury, she maybe tweets some bad stuff, or she misses weight at 125 pounds. Because I really do think that a healthy and on-weight Sijara Eubanks can beat anybody at this weight class. Because when you do mix together her aggressive striking, her cardio, and her just takedown and ground and pound, not many people can deal with her total package in the MMA cage. But with her not making weight, and with her being kind of a primary grappler, I know a lot of the time we talk about her striking, but really, how does Eubanks win MMA fights? She gets on top of people. She implements her physicality, goes for the ground and pound, and tries to soften people up that way. If you're playing that kind of a game with somebody like Melissa Gatto on the mat, and you start to get tired as the fight goes on, I'm starting to really worry about what it's going to look like in the third round, when you might get swept, and then you're on your back, and I have to see you in some of those defensive positions, because this happens a lot. I know Craig sometimes gets mad at me for saying this, but people win via submission due to just winning via exhaustion a lot.
All right,
and this,
Shale.
No, but this could be one of those matchups where we see Eubanks looking really good early on. She can hold her own in some of the grappling exchanges, and we think, hey, maybe Eubanks is going to win this, even though she did miss weight. But by the third round, she gets a little tired. She gets in one bad position, and we see Gatto just make that one Hail Mary play. She gets an arm, she gets a neck, because she does have the kind of jiu-jitsu to where if you give her an inch, she gets a mile.
And when you look at this one, I mean, Clay brings up a really, really good point up there, saying Sijara's 6-7 at 125, and the only loss to Chookagian. Does Gatto strike like Chookagian? Not really. I mean, Gatto will move forward. She throws more kicks. She throws them at different levels. But I have to throw out a big asterisk there. She did that in one fight against Victoria Leonardo. And to Craig P. Higgins' credit, who let me know that the Barcelos fight was canceled, so shouts to you. You are a true and blue FNP guy out there. But Matt, when I look at this fight, I saw that from Gatto once. Every other fight on the regional scene, and it was thrown up there, you know, Gatto doesn't have any losses. Even in those draws, I went away from watching those going, man,
this is what I will say, though. I think she is a different fighter than who she used to be, because the difference is she had a very long layoff, and then we saw her with all those improvements. So I do think that will be the relative norm from here on out. It's kind of like Mackenzie Dern. Let's be honest, you didn't like a lot of Mackenzie Dern in her early UFC days. She left a lot to be desired, but she went away, did the work, and then ever since she has made those improvements, has looked like that fighter ever since.
Eubanks opened a plus 110. The line dropped automatically down to a minus 222. Now she's minus 166. If you look at it for Gatto, open to a minus 130. She's plus 139. Feel as you will on this one. I had Melissa Gatto at the start of the week because I have a ton of underdogs this week, and I still have Gatto right now. But like I said, confidence meter, it's like in the first Trailer Park Boys movie when they go confidence meter and Corey and Trevor aren't really there. Like, I got to get to 100%. I'm just not quite there yet.
Okay, before I get my pick on this, can we just make this agreement right now? We're not switching the main event pick, right?
No.
Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure we probably won't tie. Okay, I'm going to stick with Sijara Eubanks in this. It's probably not going to work out. This might be a bit of a strategic pick on my part, but when you look at Eubanks and just sort of what the best version of her game is, it is a lot of takedown heavy games. It is very aggressive striking on the feet, but this is what I worry about, especially with Eubanks in this matchup. I worry about if she's not winning the fight on the feet, what is her plan B? Because if she is just going for panic takedowns over and over and over again, that is when Gatto will be able to, cinch up a guillotine, even get to her back, get a rear naked choke. So this is a very, very dangerous fight, but you might be able to tell that I'm going to switch another pick of a fighter who may have missed weight later on in the card. So I'll pick Sijara Eubanks for the time being.
Joe Maloney's saying that's a sick shirt, Craig. Listen, I'm getting ready for the big fight later on today. Deron Williams is going to be fighting Frank Gore. Logan's brother is going to be fighting Tyron Woodley. There's so much going on today.
Wait,
it's
who's
crazy.
your pick? Do you have Woodley or do you have Jake in the rematch?
When you're an MMA guy, you got to go with the MMA guy. So T Wood, when I was a fan of MMA,
you loved Woodley.
I loved Woodley, so I got to go with him now. I'm not a boxing guy. And Travis Duarte saying, Craig, I'm assuming what the hell's poutine? Travis, come on! It's cheese curds, gravy, and fries.
A Canadian classic.
Yeah, and listen, if there is 500 likes out there, I will add the Poirier's hot sauce to it and get it cooking. So Matt, when we're on this one, we're split on the pick. You've got Eubanks, I've got Gatto.
And I don't feel good about it. Let me just make that very clear.
All right, Matt. So we move on to our next fight. And this is the reason why I put Crashmore out there. Now listen, it's Christmas time, but you can't talk about Christmas because you have to just talk about the movie that he's in. But Justin Tafa is the first ever heavyweight to miss weight, which is crazy because think of some of the big heavyweights out there. Okay, I'm going to go through some of them. A main guy from Ellsworth, Tim Sylvia. He was big, right? Big guy. Brock Lesnar, big guy. Ben Rothwell, big Ben Rothwell.
Stefan Struve,
the biggest guy. Justin Tafa weighed 267, and they didn't let him cut anymore.
Wait, how tall is he?
6 feet.
Okay, I'm taller than he is, but he has a solid 100 pounds on me.
Harry Hunsucker weighed a lot in his debut. He got knocked out in 49 seconds by Tai Tuivasa. And I had not nice things to say about Harry Hunsucker coming into the UFC because if you look at his fight on Dana White's Contender Series, you want to go back to that because listen, did he win? No, he didn't. But he had success before he got knocked out. So then I really looked at it. I thought about it. He's good with the takedown. So at the start of the week, I took Harry Hunsucker in the plus, 250 range. He's a plus 255 right now. This is another one. How well is it going to age? Like fine wine or bad milk? We'll find out. But I'm sticking with the pick of Harry Hunsucker on this one because, man, he looked amazing. He looks like he's got defined, like, almost abs coming into this one. And listen, the people want to hear it. We're Hunsucking it this week, Matt. Hunsuck it. Let's go. And if he wins, I'm going to be all over Instagram. I'm going to be all over Twitter. I'm going to be happy about it. But again, you look at this. 7-4, 4 losses by knockout. But the guy he's fighting is 4-3. And it's been a weird bag of goodies so far for Justin Tafa in the UFC. Did he beat Carlos Felipe? Very close fight. Like, it's just been a really weird one. So when I look at this one, I still have Harry Hunsucker. Would I be surprised if Justin Tafa won? No, not at all. It's very low-level heavyweight MMA. These guys aren't going to be ranked tomorrow. But when I look at it, who has a more complete skill set? I assume it's Harry Hunsucker. And he made heavyweight.
MPTV, you're not going to like what I'm about to say. I cannot, in good faith, pick somebody who missed the heavyweight limit. Again, I kind of said this in the intro. You're the only division that is not asked to, like, diet for months and change your whole entire lifestyle around just making a specific weight for, like, 15 minutes, if we're all being completely honest, and then you can rehydrate up to your natural weight. The only good thing about weight cutting, and I know this is sort of a controversial thing to say, but it is the truth. Like, weight cutting forces you to be in as good a physical condition as you can possibly be in, or you're not going to make weight. Like, you have to put in hard work in your training camp so that you can make weight. It's very easy. Michael Chandler has said this. Like, the weight cut doesn't start the week of the fight. The weight cut starts when you accept the bout, because that's when you start to think, okay, I have to diet a certain way, I have to train a certain way, I have to run these certain miles so I can make sure that I make the weight at the end of the day. Justin Tafa wasn't asked to do any of those things. All he was asked to do is not show up above 266 pounds, which you wouldn't think is a very difficult thing to do for someone who's a professional athlete, but he wasn't able to do that. So I have a lot of concerns just around like what his training regime has been. And like you said at the start of the week, Hunsucker is the more well-rounded athlete, and I do agree with that. Like, there's no argument for me whatsoever. So now that you have the more well-rounded athlete who seems to have taken this more seriously, I do like Hunsucker in this matchup.
So when you look at this one, this is another fight. Laos Nan put it perfectly. Pop and popcorn. Like, I have no play on this at all. I get the opportunity to feel great if Hunsucker wins at giant plus money, but I've got nothing on this one because, again, like, he is a giant underdog, but he made the weight. So for me at the start of the week, it was complete skill set as long as he doesn't get cold cocked, which is a tough ask against a guy like Justin Tafa. Look at Juan Adams. He was fighting at home on a pay-per-view main card that was headlined by John Jones, and Tafa was able to knock him out. And he did the reverse Uno card of, well, I got knocked out at Marvel Stadium against Jorgen De Castro, who had his eyes closed. Now I'm knocking you out in front of your hometown fans. Have fun over there with, who is it? He signed with Aries, but he's fought for different promotions since.
Yeah,
Fury FC. I haven't followed the Juan Adams train as much as I probably should, but in this fight, Matt, I'm taking Harry Hunsucker. He took the camp serious, as AG said, and we're going to move on through it. But yeah, Hunsucking it, unprofessional. Matt, we move on to our next fight. We have Dustin Stoisfuss, and I'll milk that name forever, taking on Gerald Meerschaert. Now, Matt, Gerald Meerschaert earned his first stripe on his black belt in the last couple of weeks from Rafael Lovato Jr. You know the guy who was Bellator champ until, he had some issues in his head, and they forced him away. And it really sucks because Lovato Jr. is one of the most special talents out there. You don't beat Gegard Mousasi by accident. You really don't. So when I look at this fight, Matt, Kyle Kelly's saying, has Matt ever subbed you growing up? If he did, I can't remember. But when we look at this fight, Matt, Dustin Stoisfuss has an equalizer in this fight. He has decent cardio, he has good grappling, and if he puts them tangs on him, he could knock him down.
But that's the best version of him, isn't it? And we haven't really seen that, unfortunately, because I do agree with you. He is sort of one of those fighters where if you want to paint the perfect picture of him, it's like, oh my god, wait, he's in the top 10, right? But then you actually sort of watch it and you're like, okay, he lacks a lot of the in-betweens that help you win in high-level MMA. Like, he doesn't have great volume. He does have sort of a bit of a pitter-patter style. He relies on a high volume of kicks, which is always weird at MMA. Remember when Elias Theodorou beat Daniel Kelly and went on every show ever and just bragged about how many kicks he threw? He was like, I kicked him 940 times and didn't drop him. Weird thing to brag about. That's
CBS had an article on him this week.
That's great for them. Anyways, it's just Dustin does have one of those very unique styles where I don't know where that fits into in sort of the modern MMA game, if that's fair. I think if he wins this fight, it will more than likely be by decision because he does rely a lot on that sort of outward movement, a lot of kicks, like I said, and some of that work on the outside. And the thing about Stoichfus is that, yes, he's a good grappler, but I don't think he's as good as Gerald Meerschaert when it comes to the grappling. I really don't. Meerschaert has proven that in MMA, yes, there might be people out there who are better in pure jiu-jitsu, but like Gerald Meerschaert, and I don't think this is controversial to say at all, is one of the greatest MMA jiu-jitsu practitioners we've really ever seen. And he uses it well in the cage too. He's somebody who will transition, uses ground and pound, open up submissions. He can sub you off his back. He can sub you on your back. He has a great variety of submissions. So I do like Meerschaert in this matchup.
Gerald Meerschaert is tied for 5th all-time with most finishes at middleweight with Jacare Souza, Uriah Hall, Thiago Santos. He has the #1 most submissions in middleweight history at 7, more than Demian Maia, who is behind him in 2nd place. Matt, when we look at this fight, Stoisfuss can definitely catch him on the way in. If it's a lazy attempt at the grappling exchange, Stoisfuss has good kicks, again, to the calf, to the knee, to the thigh. You kicked at the thigh, though, you might get taken down. You never know. Gerald Meerschaert is the guy that I have in this fight. He is a big favorite, though, which is kind of funny because he's normally an underdog in this one. And this is one of those ones where Fight Night Picks, there's a little bit of bias towards Gerald Meerschaert on the channel. If you checked out our 2nd channel, 15-minute card breaks, we went a little nutty for Gerald Meerschaert card pull.
He's just, he's going to be one of those fighters that in 10 years, nobody's probably going to know who he is if you've watched MMA. But, like, if you paid attention, if you were a big hardcore fan at the time, you probably remember Gerald Meerschaert. You could probably say, like, hey, remember that time he was the big underdog against Mahmoud Muradov and everyone thought he was going to lose, but he looked really good? Like, he's had a lot of those fun performances and sort of memorable times out there to where hopefully Meerschaert can reach kind of the hardcore's Hall of Fame, if you will, with the Joe Lozons and the Jim Millers of the world.
I have an idea while we're away on break, and I'm thinking about making a mini documentary about one of Gerald Meerschaert's losses. He has a loss on his record
to Jay Ellis.
To 16-102 Jay Ellis. So, yeah, I'm thinking about doing a Jay Ellis documentary while we're away. Matt, we'll move on to our next fight. We have Kevin Swanson taking on Darren Elkins. And for Kevin, this is a guy that if you don't have 3 fights, you can't talk about his fights. So we're going to have to skip over it. We'll move on to Diego Ferreira and Mateusz Gamrot. No, I'm just kidding. We have this as a fight of the night because for Cub Swanson, He's one of the most electric fighters that we've ever seen. I mean, he really is. You want to watch a fun fight? When he fought Crone Gracie, was Crone going to submit him? You thought, and then they boxed each other. So Darren Elkins coming in here full head of steam. He's finished 2 fights in a row. He's been such a fun fighter to watch. And for Cub Swanson, you want to see a fight where I thought he was going to lose, and then after the first round, I really thought he was going to lose? No. The first 4 minutes of the fight, I thought he was going to lose. Then, oh man, you had his opponent really, really losing steam in Daniel Pineda. So, Matt, when we look at this fight, Laos Non saying Kevin, that's his
Just
name.
call him Cub.
I'm calling him Cub. When we're looking at this one, Matt, Cub Swanson has such a good opportunity here against Darren Elkins, but the same thing can be said for Elkins.
Exactly. If Elkins is going to win this fight, it's going to be ground and pound takedowns. And it's hard to say ground and pound finish, but you get the idea. It's just going to be that rinse and repeat grinder type of a style. If Cub wins this fight, it's going to be spectacular, like Twitter retweet kind of stuff, to where ESPN MMA is going to retweet it 1,000 times. We're going to see the highlights for months to come, because Cub Swanson, even in this stage of his career, is still a very effective MMA striker. He's very wonky. Like Joe Rogan always used to say, oh, Cub Swanson, he has some of the best MMA boxing out there. I don't agree with that personally. I think he's sort of got his own unique style of MMA striking, because he does take some damage. He does take some big risks on the feet. He does do some of those like switch stance lunging punches, but in MMA those things are effective, because even if you do go for a takedown, even if you do target my body, then we can scramble, we can get into a bunch of different positions from there. It will be really interesting though, just to see who wins the first round, because I think no matter what, Darren Elkins is probably going to win the 3rd round of this fight. I know that's wild to say, because Swanson does have good cardio, but at a certain point, if you get to the 3rd round with a guy like Darren Elkins, he's going to get one of those takedowns. He just will. It's his style of fighting. He might go 1 for 12, but he will get that one, and he's going to make great use of it. So I think this is a phenomenal fight. It is a clash of styles, although both guys are very well-rounded, but I do like Cub Swanson's ability to just consistently damage Darren Elkins on the feet.
And Matt, when I look at this one, and MPTV was saying up there at some point, now I missed you, but you're there somewhere, oh, I believe the damage is fully depleted. I thought the same thing until his last 2 fights when he took on Garagori and then Minner, and I mean, listen, Darren Elkins was at the top of the mountain, then he lost, 4 in a row, and then all of a sudden he's right back to beating guys that, yeah, he probably should beat, but still, it's Darren Elkins. For Cub Swanson, kind of the same thing can be said. There was a question about Swanson's takedown defense. It's 60%, which isn't the greatest, especially against a guy that has a high work rate with his takedowns in Elkins, so might scare you away from this one. I have Cub Swanson because, listen, when you look at fights, Darren Elkins is like Nate Diaz when he accepts the damage. And he has a lot of scar tissue. You can see it in the picture, but it really is true. When he gets cut up, he almost fights better, but it is one of those things where it sways the judges a little bit. We'll have to see how it plays out, because if Swanson's takedown defense is there, which is weird because a lot of his training over on the Instagrams looks like he was training high-level boxing, so it'll be interesting to see how it all plays together. I have Swanson, but this isn't one of the more confident ones on the card.
Elkins holds his hands out really far from his head, and if you... Now, again, I'm going to compare Cub Swanson to Volkanovski, who's like the best in the world, but hear me out. Volkanovski was really able to give Elkins troubles where he'd throw feints up the middle and then respond with a big looping shot on the outside. He dropped Elkins about once per round. It felt like he dropped him about 5 times a round in that fight, but he really made him pay for holding his hands out with the looping shots, and Cub does have a very similar way of throwing his own punches. So if he is able to back Elkins up against the cage and start to unload with his own combos, I think he'll do a lot of damage on
the
poor Elkins.
Desert Sun. The headline is UFC's Cub Swanson doesn't know how much longer he'll fight, but he still has his reasons. Both of us going with Cub Swanson in this one. Matt, we'll move on to our next fight. It's fight of the night after fight of the night. Knock on wood. But we have Diego Ferreira taking on Mateusz Gamrot. Now, is Mateusz in the locker room watching KSW today? Watching, Paul Nass take on a guy that missed weight who's the champ? Is he going to be watching Kaladov and Soldic? I don't know. But I do know that he has a tough test in front of him, because what Mateusz is good at it's kind of what Diego Ferreira is good at. So we should have some Scramble City. We should have some interesting striking exchanges in this fight. I have Mateusz Gamrot as the second leg of the question mark kicks parlay. I have Mateusz, and I have, who was it earlier? Charles Jourdain. They're both minus 200 to plus 125 is what you get out of it. But again, you do whatever you want. You do whatever you want. I like Mateusz in this one. Laos Non is going very, very far in this one. So what are you saying here?
I like Mateusz in this one, but if we see Scramble City, he's probably going to lose. Because if Diego gets on top of him, it's over. I'm sorry. That's the big difference in this fight. Yes, they're both very good grapplers, but if Diego Ferreira gets on top of Mateusz Gamrot, he can finish him at any moment. That's how good his jiu-jitsu is. The difference is I think Diego can kind of play off his back a little bit with Mateusz, at least early on in the fight, kind of like what we saw with Gregor Gillespie. Fahea off his back is still a dangerous fighter. He's just not as dangerous as when he is in that top position. I know I compared him to Jacare, and it really is the same effect, to where when he's on top, you have to worry about everything. He can go for ankle pick, or ankle locks. He can go for arm bars, rear naked chokes. Like, any submission in the book is what Diego Fahea has at his disposal. Gamrot is a little bit different. Yes, he himself has great submissions, but they're a lot more of like those kind of classic wrestler submissions, if you will. It's a lot of Kimuras, a lot of head and arm chokes. It's a lot of things that they require strength first and technique after. And I don't mean that Gamrot's one of those guys who just relies on his athleticism, but you can tell that he is a very high level athlete who's been able to incorporate a lot of the MMA skills after the fact. He's sort of a more exciting version of what Alexander Rakic could be. They fight in a sort of similar manner to where they both impose their physicality, they use their pace a lot. Different weight classes, so they are different, but I always kind of think that the best version of Rakic could sort of become what we see out of Gamrot. This will be really interesting on the feet, though, because I worry about Gamrot striking with guys in the top 15. I might be in the minority there, but...
No, you're right, because if you go back, you want to see fun fights. Gamrot when he's fighting Norman Park. But the trouble is, if you're going strike for strike with Norman Park, and I believe Norman Park is a good fighter, he never should have left the UFC early on, whatever, but when you're going strike for strike with Norman Park, your faces are bloodied and puffed up at the end. And Norman Park looked bad after them, but so did Gamrot. That doesn't bode well when you fight Guram Kutataladze, who, if he can fight, he's an amazing fighter. But the people over there, I mean, MMA Kappa, there's a lot of other people, and I'm not going to mention because it's way up there. But everybody's saying Fiziev Gamrot. I don't want to see that.
No.
I don't need that. I have Gamrot in this fight, but yeah, we don't need that.
No, I like Gamrot in this matchup too, but it will be interesting. If Diego Fahea didn't have a bad weight cut, if we do see the version of him that fought Mirabek Taisimov, for instance, this could be a very difficult fight for Gamrot because we haven't seen him in the third round of a fight where he has been wrestling a lot against a guy who can sort of go grappling exchange for grappling exchange with him. So I think this will be an absolutely amazing fight, but I do agree. I like Gamrot.
Hermes França, that's another guy. I mean, there's so many names out there. There's people that the UFC never should have got rid of, but Matt, we'll move on to our next fight. Rafael Assunção taking on Ricky Simone, and it's like, out with the old, in with the new, but it really isn't. I mean, for Assunção, I have this to say. Yes, he's on a little bit of a losing streak. Yes, he hasn't fought in some time, and he is very old in his career. This guy that beat TJ Dillashaw was a forever contender. He was always like, what, number 2, number 3, number 4. He was always up there, winning fights somewhat in a boring fashion. But if you look at it for Rafael Assunção and you just look over at the IGs, and I say this sometimes, a guy at bantamweight that's 40 that looks that good, holy frig, man. I wish I could get to that point in my life, but if we get another 224 likes, I mean, I'm eating poutine on screen, but we're not there yet. So when we're in this one, kudos to Rafael Assunção to show the commitment to make the weight. 3 other people on this card weren't able to do it. This guy's 40 at 135, and he did it. He's taking on, like, it's like the Neil Young song, or if you really focus in on the newer songs, Old Man, Take a Look at My Life, I'm a Lot Like You. That's this fight.
A little bit. And Ricky Simone does have a great previous fight to sort of come off of to get him ready for this. Because Brian Kelleher, in a lot of areas, is a very similar fighter to Rafael Assunção. Now, I would say prime Rafael Assunção is much better than Brian Kelleher, but you get the idea. Both somewhat heavy-handed guys in the feet when they put it all together and really sit down on their power shots, I should say. But very well-rounded fighters who can win by submission. They have great pace, and they're just sort of good all over the place. I just worry about Assunção at this stage of his career because even when he was kind of the 3rd and 4th ranked guy in the world, it felt like he was somewhat strategically ranked to where I always compared him to like Ricardo Lamas at 145 pounds to where, yeah, they're in the top 5, but you're looking at everybody in the top 10. You're like, well, I'd rather fight him than the 8th ranked guy. I'd rather fight him than even like the 11th ranked guy. Like, there's always that one fighter in the top 10 of every division that kind of stands out like a sore thumb. And I love Yair Rodriguez's fighting style, but he sort of benefited from this after he beat the Korean Zombie. He beat the Zombie. Zombie goes on to have some great wins afterwards, but then all of a sudden, like, Yair's going up in the ranks just because he had beat him previously. That's kind of what they did with, Assunção and Dillashaw. Like, oh, well, he beat him way back when. We'll just always sort of keep him near the top of the division in case we need that trilogy. I'm not saying that's what they did. It just always felt like even when he was in the top 3, top 4, he felt like one of the more beatable fighters at this weight class. And that's why I do think we are going to see sort of in with the old, out with the new. 3 years ago, would a Sun Tzu have beaten Ricky Simone? Yeah, he probably would have dominated him, defended every takedown attempt, and put a beating on him on the feet. I just don't think it's the same fighter at this stage of his career, so I do like the younger Simone.
Keep it cool, saying Simone looked bad at the weigh-ins and made me switch my pick to a Sun Tzu. Simone's a big favorite, too. He's in the minus 280 range, and listen, I don't love Ricky Simone at minus 280. I'm going to pick him for the sake of picking the fight, but if you like a Sun Tzu at that big a plus money, I'm not going to stun all over you and laugh.
This is what I've always said about Ricky Simone. Personally, I feel like he has to add some sort of a somewhat major wrinkle to his game for him to really be able to stay around in the top 15 and have a lot of success. Because how many guys like Ricky Simone have we seen in this weight division just kind of hang around? Like, Jimmy Rivera is as good of a wrestler and boxer as you can get in this division. And even he had, I don't want to say a forgettable career, but you get the idea. Like, he was just kind of around, left, and did his own thing. Like, if Ricky Simone really wants to become that top 5 guy in the future, become the guy who was supposed to get, like, I don't know, a bunch of shine off guys like Uriah Faber and even this fight against the Sun Tzu, I do think he is going to have to add something major to his game.
And I think, to me, it's the boxing. We saw that when he fought Brian Kelleher. I really liked that in his last fight, Matt. 616 tuning in right now. Only 250 likes. We got to get up there. We got to double it. And double it. When we have this fight, Matt, Amanda Lemos taking on Angela Hill. And for Amanda Lemos, was it supposed to be Nina Nunes? That seemed to be the chat. She came out and said, I always knew that Nunes was going to pull out of the fight. Ooh. But now you have Angela Hill, who's 13-10, but that doesn't tell the whole story because it's been very good competition the whole way through. And very close fight and a lot of split decisions at that. So for Angela Hill, she could go out there, volume. Amanda Lemos could go out there. And listen, if you look at it for Amanda Lemos, and I'm going to bring it up so we can really talk about it. The fight against I don't know what happened to, not Montserrat Ruiz, but Lavinia Souza. She looked like a shell of herself in her last 2 fights.
Like, okay, we should have done this at the start of the year just so I would have run away with the trophy in a landslide, but it's like she got her power space jammed away. Like, here, hold this trophy really quick. Okay. Hopefully now I have the prediction powers right now, because that's what it felt like happened.
Charles Bob.
Exactly. Because that's what it felt like happened to Lavinia Souza, because she was very well-rounded. She had her own kind of quirks that set her apart from just your average fighter at this weight class. And then she fell off a hill, kind of lost her confidence, never got it back, and was a shell of herself ever since. Now, is that why people might be buying Amanda Lemos high right now? Maybe, because that's the thing about Lemos, and even I've sort of fallen into this trap. You look at her last 2 performances, you look at just how impressive they were, and then you really have to ask yourself, is it that impressive to hit Montserrat Ruiz with 1 shot and her fall down? Well, not really, because Ruiz isn't that good of a striker, like at all, like an awful striker. And Lavinia Souza just didn't even look like she wanted to be in there that night of the fight. Now, it is very similar to who lost to Rude Boy Randy Brown. They got Warley Alves. Remember Warley Alves got submitted by Randy Brown? It's one of the weirdest fights in UFC history that no one talks about because
Warley Alves' last fight against Jeremiah Wells.
It's just I always find the one with Rude Boy stands out because like he wasn't even like engaged in the fight. He was looking away. He wasn't like he wasn't even trying. It was really, really weird. So when you reference that fight, you always sort of have to put a weird red flag on it. I feel like even though I'm a supporter of Lemos, you have to do a very similar thing with her and her last 2 performances, because if she goes out there and outstrikes Angela Hill, that's really going to prove to me that, okay, now you are ready for those, like, top 7 to top 5 fighters, and maybe you could be a similar fighter to, like, a Marina Rodriguez, where you can be a main eventer on maybe sort of a weaker fight night, but you get the idea, sort of a staple of the division. If you get outstruck by Angela Hill, though, then we sort of know what kind of a fighter you are. You can be good, but you are going to always come short of greatness.
When I look at this fight, Amanda Lemos at a minus 310, not worth it at all. So John Chai, I don't know. Like, I would not go with that. I have a really hard time on this one. And especially, like, at a minus 310 for Lemos, like, that scares me.
It scares me, but I do have to be honest. I do like Lemos a lot in this fight, because Angela Hill, the more that I've watched her, I do think she falls into a bit of a Joanne Wood category, to where the best version of an Angela Hill fight is still probably coming close to a split decision. Like, it's still going to be a lot of, I'm throwing those arm punches, but if you get on the inside even a little bit, you're also going to land your own shots on me. And that's always the interesting thing about Hill. She could fight to a split decision with the second-ranked fighter in the world, but she could also fight to a split decision with someone just coming off Contender Series. And I do think that we are going to finally see her get convincingly outstruck, because this is the one fighter that is going to meet her strikes with power. Against Michelle Waterson, you can stand in the pocket, just try to get your volume numbers high, because you don't have to worry about anything coming back your way. Against Lemos, you do have to worry about the power coming back your way, and that's why I like Lemos Lemos.
I have two things for the chat. First one for Jake and Bake, passing, and for the second one, Morgan Branch, be gone. I love that movie, and that's one of my favorite parts. Who's the tall white guy in that movie?
And
Space Jam that hardly ever has any.
Sean
Anderson. Like it's a.
He recently passed away, unfortunately.
Did he?
Yeah, he got a bike accident, I think.
If you can think of it, somebody out there, I wish I knew.
I can't believe I blanked on that.
Yeah, that's sad. I've got Lemos too, but again, not a ton of confidence in it. Matt, we move into our co-main event. Wonderboy
Sean Bradley, thank you.
Sean Bradley. And listen.
No, he got paralyzed in a bike accident.
The Manly channel, thanks for all the hard work, boys. I listen on Spotify over and over all week. We really appreciate it. Listen, I have to say this. I appreciate all the support out there. When we forget about who Sean Bradley is, Bob Collins, John, they have us in the chat. Everybody's got our backs. And when it's not a good week, last week, let's all throw cards on the table with the most amount of people tuning in. It was a 7-7 week. You don't want that. You want to end this week on a high note. I want to end this week on a high note. I wore a friggin' Mayweather Paul shirt. So we're going to have a lot of fun. But Matt, Bilal Muhammad's taking on the man himself, Steve Wonderboy Thompson. Sean McMinn hit us up in the super chat. We spam and saying, what's a poutine? It's fries, gravy, and cheese curds. And for smokes, they advertise it as cheese curds from Quebec. So if it's that way, you know it's got to be good. But Matt, when we're looking on this one, you have Bilal Muhammad, who made striking advancements in his career. We talked about that. I mean, we have fighters that have made giant leaps and bounds in their striking. Ricky Simone's one of those guys. I'm not just a wrestler. I'm here to bang, bro. And Bilal Muhammad did that against Diego Lima.
Okay.
Diego's a good striker. Bilal looked amazing.
I need you to remember the name Diego Lima, though. Just keep on going.
But also remember the name Bilal Muhammad. So in this fight, Matt, for Wonderboy, he never gets taken out, but he did. I mean, listen, his last fight out, Gilbert Burns made him look a little old, so it's going to be one of those fights. We'll see what happens. Dolphins fans saying, I made a fortune on Kai Kara-France by knockout. That's the one where you can find solace and saying, hey, you said that Kai Kara-France is going to get a big win over Cody Garbrandt. You can pat yourself on the back.
And I said there was a good chance it was by stoppage, too.
Now, when we look at this one, it's another tricky one. I have Wonderboy,
but I don't like anything I've heard him say this week. Because this is the first week it feels like he hasn't talked about fighting Kamaru Usman in a very long time. Even when he fought Gilbert Burns, even when he fought Vicente Luque, it was like, okay, if I win this fight, then the next time out, I could fight Usman. Or I could at least get a title shot no matter who the champion is. I now don't feel like he has that same feeling to his career. And now he might just feel like, okay, if I beat Bilal, then I'll just fight another top guy. And I might try to turn away another contender. But this is my problem when you bring up the fact that Bilal Muhammad outstruck Diego Lima. Wonderboy Thompson outstruck Vicente Luque. If we're comparing levels of opponents and how they outstruck them, I would say Vicente Luque is on a completely other planet to anything Diego Lima does. So I just think that if Bilal does find himself striking for even like minute time frames in this fight, he's going to get lit up. And the weird thing about Bilal Muhammad is that we've seen him fight similar fighters to Wonderboy, those guys who do just specialize in, okay, my defensive grappling might not be great, but I'm just going to try to defend takedowns, I've got a good first move off my back, and I can punish guys with my strikes. That's what Wonderboy does. We've seen Bilal Muhammad. He got knocked out by Vicente Luque. He struggled with Alan Jourdain, who does that. He struggled with, who else? Jeff Neal. He got dropped a bunch of times. So, like, we've seen him struggle with similar fighters to Wonderboy Thompson, and that's why I like Wonderboy so much, unless Father Time has just taken something from him that he can never get back.
It's a really tricky one. I mean, for Muhammad, training at VFS, do you think that plays a little bit of a role? Like, if you're training with a guy like Ignacio Bahamondes, could he help you here?
I don't think he does, to be completely honest. I just don't think anyone can really prepare you for what Wonderboy is, because he is so unique. Again, this is a guy who knocked out Robert Whittaker at 170 pounds. And I know Whittaker doesn't have the same level of durability, or didn't have the same kind of durability at welterweight that he does at middleweight, but like, this is the kind of striker we're talking about. There's few other fighters out there who it's like, okay, well, he's outstruck Robert Whittaker, Vicente Luque, and like Jeff Neal. We're just not going to talk about him every day. Like, this is how special of a striker Wonderboy Thompson is, and I don't think he's ever truly gotten the credit for how special his striking is. I wouldn't even be surprised if he got his first stoppage in a very long time tonight. I'll say that, because again, we've seen Bilal struggle with the power of some of these guys. Like, Leon Edwards hurt him on the feet. Again, Luque, but Luque has absurd punching power. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Wonderboy finish. That's all I'm saying.
Rick the Ruler 713. Here's the scoop. When there's a layoff with the UFC, please, I ask of you, check out our other content. We're going to have year-end awards. Last year, they slapped.
They did.
And they were a lot of fun to do. There was us, there was John Franklin as almost like a moderator panelist. We had a lot of fun with it, and we had some wild, like, out-of-the-box picks for some of these things. Like, Fighter of the Year. Will it be Chris Curtis?
No.
He's my Fighter of the Year.
Craig.
But when I look at this one, Matt, yeah, I have Wonder Boy in this fight. I think Bilal Muhammad, he had a little bit of trouble with the range. Luis Rodriguez saying as much. Against Edwards, I think he's going to have the same problem. In this fight, the hot sauce is hitting. I did it before 500, but yeah, for this one, it is a tricky fight for both guys.
So I guess my question now is, what's the ceiling for both of these? Like, do you think the winner of this does get another, like, potential title eliminator matchup? Like, I just don't really know what the future of either guy is, because it feels like, to me,
Wonder Boy gets Masvidal.
Okay.
And Bilal Muhammad gets somebody that can wrestle.
All right, then.
That's the
maybe
way.
Gilbert Burns.
Maybe
just,
that's.
This division's so odd right now because Usman's not like a crazy superstar, but he's not like an average champion either. So there's always kind of the money fight sort of situation with the division. I never really know what welterweight's going to look like in the next year or 2 years.
All right, Matt, we move on to our next fight. And in the main event, you have Derek Lewis, Chris Daukaus. Start of the week, I've got the underdog who's fought for the title twice. One interim, one not. And Derek Lewis, you have the man himself, the former CFFC great, who fought for the title, lost to Zhu Hanyanwu, but since then, he's won every single fight. He's finished fights. They've all been very quick. In his last fight out, he beat Shamil Durkimov in the second round. In the first round, but now we're here, man. For Chris Daukaus, he's the lighter man. He is the faster guy.
Oh, way faster.
He doesn't have the same type of power that Derek Lewis has.
Does anyone?
But we'll see what happens here. And listen, he's the younger guy. He has that on his side. He wasn't able to get the leave of absence, so he's not a cop right now. So there is that too. But Matt, when we look at this one, again, Ignorant MMA saying Daukaus is too fast for Lewis, but I'm a Daukaus stan. I think that's going to be the main talking point for this fight. Daukaus is quicker, but one guy has that just knockout, lights out type of power in Derek Lewis. Look at the Volkov fight. Look at the Tybura fight. Look at, we can go Curtis Blades fight, on and on and on and on. So we look at this one. You have Derek Lewis, you have Chris Daukaus. We're only split on what? The Eubanks Gatto fight right now?
Yeah, I stayed with the Eubanks.
So we're only split on this one and that fight. Are we still split on this fight now?
Well, I'm still picking Daukaus.
Okay.
You got Lewis?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So this is the thing about this fight. Chris Daukaus is basically better technically than Derek Lewis at everything. But, and here's a big but, Derek Lewis probably weighs like 40 pounds more, and if he lands even like an 80% power punch, it can put anybody out. Like, Derek Lewis could knock out a giraffe, and it wouldn't be surprising at all. That's the kind of knockout power this guy has in his hands, and it is that very unique, like, round 1 to round 5 kind of power, because Lewis doesn't fight at a crazy work rate to where he's going to outwork himself, similar to what Anthony Smith did against Glover Teixeira, for instance, where he had such a high work rate early that he wasn't able to keep that up throughout 5 rounds. Lewis isn't going to beat himself with his own work rate. He'll kind of work his way into the fight. He's okay with burning a round or two because Lewis knows that, like, hey, I'm probably not going to win a 5-round decision. I'll just wait for my opportunity to knock out my opponent. But this is my big point with Chris Daukaus, and especially this Chris Daukaus. I liked him a lot earlier on in his career when he did have a second job that he had to worry about outside of just being a cage fighter. Now we're getting full-time Chris Daukaus, and I do like it. Like, full-time Chris Daukaus, I don't know if that's going to become like C-level Cain Velasquez, but now that he is fully dedicated to this and this being his lifestyle, I think we could see another jump from him. And listen, am I ready to say that Chris Daukaus can take on like the Francis Ngannous and the Cyril Gans of the world? Maybe not yet, but I do like Daukaus, who does seem to be improving every single time out there, a little bit more than Lewis, who is the same fighter, fight in and fight out. Like, if you like Lewis, it's because he's durable, he's got that weird kind of power, and oddly enough, he just has that staying power for a heavyweight, even though they don't really come to mind. And for Daukaus, I like his body shots. I like his ability to work in tight, but I do really worry about Chris Daukaus in open space in this fight.
Yeah, I really like Derek Lewis in this fight because, again, for Daukaus, he brings the fight to you, which is how Lewis knocks guys out. For Daukaus, I like the Martinez BJJ, but we never see his ground game. And if Alexei Oleinik can get you in a big brother choke and not submit you, if very, very good fighters on the ground can't finish Derek Lewis.
I mean, Dana Cormier.
I don't see, yeah, but he's to the nth degree. I don't see Chris Daukaus doing it. So, we got to stand and bang. One guy has a high work rate, he's got long gangly arms, and he's got good power at the end of his shots. Like, I have earned, that's the wrong way to say it. I feel like I need to give Chris Daukaus his flowers every time out because I pick apart a little bit of his game and then he goes out there and he wins. So I love everything that Daukaus has, but I do have a hard time trying to pick him in this fight. I think Derek Lewis has that equalizing, fight finishing, hot sauce burning type of a style where I really do have him getting the win, and Austin Laxton saying, we want Daukaus versus Aspinall. I do too.
So do I. But this is a heavyweight fight that we're both really excited for. Like, I don't know if you guys can tell our energy levels between Hunsucker Tafa and Derek Lewis, Chris Daukaus, but like, I really do think this main event's going to be a phenomenal fight no matter who wins. Because like you said, Chris Daukaus brings the fight to you because he is sort of an undersized heavyweight and he has to do that to get wins. So just his fighting style is going to make Derek Lewis try to go for those big fight enders. So I think maybe not technically, but I think entertainment wise, this is going to be a great main event.
You're telling me that Hunsucker isn't going to be a big thing? Yeah, watch out for your ears on that one, everybody out there. But Matt, yeah, it is a great fight. We'll go back through this card, but listen, I just want to say before we do, a special thanks to everybody out there. I mean, 2021 was a wild year for Fight Night picks. We're one pick apart, and we're different on two of them. So listen, if Eubanks wins and then Lewis wins, we're tied, and that's not good. Well, we're tied tonight, and then that's not good for Matt. So we'll see what happens. But I really do appreciate all the support, everybody that's hit up the super chat. The break is going to be a lot of fun. We'll get to kind of go back to the Fight Night Picks roots, the early start of the pandemic when we were doing all sorts of wild, wacky stuff.
There's going to be
the
content,
time.
guys.
There's going to be a lot of fun. So I really do want to thank everybody out there. Matt, we'll go back to the bottom. We have Leavitt, we have Sayles. Again, giant disclaimer. Sayles being away, ballooning a weight, and then making weight for this one. He's a good striker. Jourdain Leavitt isn't, but his wrestling could be the equalizer. I have Leavitt, but I have reservations on this fight.
I think Klay Thompson's going to come back and be really good. I can't say the same thing about Matt Sayles. I like Jourdain Leavitt.
It's a really, really tricky one. So, Matt, we'll move on to our next one. Dante Almeida, Josh Parisian. I had the underdog at the start of the week. I still have him in this one, but if like low-level heavyweight, so just stay away, pop and pop.
Exactly. This is low-level heavyweights at their best, I guess, but I do like the more consistent Parisian in this one.
Both of us going with Parisian in that one. Pennington, Chiasson. We're still with Pennington even after the move up to featherweight and Chiasson weighing more and she's bigger. She could come in here, and I saw it in the comments section, and I can't remember who it was. She could come in here like Joel Alvarez and just giant striking and making it mean.
I hope not, because I'm picking Pennington, but yes, that is a very real thing that could happen.
All right, Charles Jourdain va combattre contre André Ewell. Moi, je vais avec Charles, puis c'est la première partie du QMK parlay. À moins de 100, I'm going with Charles Jourdain.
I also really like Charles Jourdain. I think his forward pressure is going to cause Ewell quite a bit of problems. Now, if Ewell can land that one big shot on the back foot, then yes, the fight could be over very quick. But I like Jourdain's ability to go to the legs and the body. I like El Jourdain.
It's like me sitting here, and sometimes when I'm in the office, like I like to listen to MGMT. And obviously they have all those old bangers. And then there's that newer song that's like, me and Michael. And there's probably some guy named Michael that just pounds that in his car and just absolutely loves it. It's me and Charles here tonight. We're going with Charles. Matt, our next fight, we have Sijara Eubanks taking on Melissa Gatto. We were split at the start of the week. We're split now. I've got Gatto in this one.
I can't believe that I'm relying on a Sijara Eubanks missing weight to try to win this MVP this year. Like, this is how desperate I've gotten on the last event of the year. But yeah, I guess I have Sijara Eubanks.
All right, Matt, and I've got Gatto. We move into our next fight. Tafa misses at heavyweight. I had Hunsucker at the start of the week. I still have Hunsucker now. It's low-level MMA. Stay away from it. Just enjoy it from your couch or wherever you're watching the fight. I've got Hunsucker to Hunsuck it!
I'm going to switch my pick to Hunsucker, but again, I would like it to be known that in the situation of there's 1 second on the clock and I'm down by 1, you go for the 2-point conversion. You don't just try to kick it in the 1 point.
All right, Matt, we move into our next fight. We have Gerald Mearshart and Dustin Stoisfuss, and I've got Steady Eddie Gerald to get the win.
The submission specialist, some might call him. Yes, I like Gerald Mearshart as well.
Middleweight record holder, Cub Swanson's taking on Darren Elkins. Another one right down the middle. I've got Swanson, but listen, if Elkins goes out there and just puts the shoes on to wrestle, he could easily get a win. Cub Swanson's wrestling defense is great, and he's been working a lot on his boxing for this camp, from what the IG says.
I like Cub Swanson in this fight, but it should be a great fight no matter what.
All right, Matt. Next one, we have Diego Ferreira taking on Mateusz Gamrot. Now, is Diego going to go the way of Cesar? Is he going to go over and fight with PFL if he loses this one? We'll see what happens. I have Mateusz Gamrot. It's the second leg of the QMK parlay. Another minus 200, so Listen, nothing crazy. 200 gets you plus 125. You live to see another day. Live to see next year, and you don't put a lot on it because this is a fight night where anything could happen.
I like Mateusz Gamrot, but again, the best version of Diego Ferreira could give him a very, very hard fight. Now, will we see that version tonight? I don't know. If I'm being completely honest, he's a little bit older. I don't know what the weight cut does to his body at this stage of his career, but him at his best could beat Mateusz Gamrot, and there's not a doubt in my mind of that possibility. But I do like Gamrot being the younger guy. And here's the thing. If Gamrot does get this win, it's only going to set him up for like co-main event, maybe even like main event fight night style fights. So if he is able to get this, there should be nothing but great fights for here on out.
Marco Madsen fought Clay Guida in a co-main event in 2021. If Mateusz wins this fight, he gets a co-main event.
I hope so.
All right, Matt. But then again, Andre Arlovsky got one against Carlos Felipe, and that wasn't that long ago. We have Rafael Sunsao taking on Ricky Simone. I've got Simone at minus 288. Gives me pause. It gives me pause.
3 years ago, a Sunsao probably destroys him in like a weird 5-round main event in Brazil, but I do like Ricky Simone being the younger guy, and I do think he's the stronger guy, which will matter at this stage of their career, because if they do get into a grappling heavy fight, I just see Simone being the guy who ends up on top more often.
All right, Matt, we move into our next fight. Amanda Lemos taking on Angela Hill. Lemos minus 310. Yikes. I've got Lemos, but man, Angela Hill can spoil that party. Like, she has many.
She can, but I do like Lemos. I gotta be honest. This is the first time Hill's fought a striker who can really make her pay for just standing there trying to accumulate a high level of volume. So I think Lemos should be able to make her pay with power shots.
All right, Matt. Our next fight, we have Wonder Boy. What's the secret to your powers? He's looking like I don't know, what's a bad superhero? I always remember you had that the Marvel book and you go through the names and we kept coming back to Dum Dum Dugan, but that's probably not the one we want to go with. But he's just not on the up and up right now. He's probably in one of the worst parts of his career. He's 2-3 in his 5 on in against the highest level competition.
So you think he's like Trevor Ariza? Like he was really good, but now he's just like bumping around.
No, he's like your guy Tyler Hero.
Well, Tyler Hero's really good. He's going to win 6th Man of the Year.
Yeah, but you're not on the court as much.
He's averaging 20 points per game. Okay, not here nor there. Here's the thing. I like Wonder Boy in this fight because we've seen Bilal Muhammad struggle with fighters who fight similar to Wonder Boy. But what I will say is that Wonder Boy doesn't really have the power punches that some of those other guys do. I know he dropped Luque with the hands, but a lot of his power shots, at least with his own boxing, come from counter shots on the inside. And I just don't think he's going to have the opportunity to do that a lot. So Wonder Boy's going to have to rely on his kicking range a lot. And if that's the case, I don't think Muhammad's going to be able to take him down from like halfway across the cage. So I think Wonder Boy should be able to just do work on the feet.
There's times when you want to be proven wrong. If Bilal goes out there, again, does what he did to Takashi Sato, I'd love to see it. That'd be crazy.
I played Hero in high school. Well, that's cool, Paul Pierce. You played against Tyler Hero in high school.
All right, Matt. And in our main event of the evening, we're split on the pick. I've got Derek Lewis. I've got him to win. I think that one-punch knockout power is going to play dividends. We saw when Daukaus fought Zhu Anyanwu, he had good success at range. When it got up against the cage, bang, bang, and then the fight's over. I think that's going to happen this weekend.
And it very well could, because again, Derek Lewis has like some of the craziest knockout power we've ever seen. It's him and Francis Ngannou, and that's pretty much it. I would put him on that level.
Great fight those guys had.
Oh yeah, I highly recommend going back and watching it. Now, I think Francis probably hits a little bit harder than Derek Lewis, but still, you get the idea. It's that true like one-punch knockout. When they hit people, you're concerned for that other person's well-being. I just don't think he's going to get the chance to do it against the much faster Chris Daukaus. Now, I could be proven wrong because, again, 25 minutes is a very, very long time to fight someone like Derek Lewis, who always has that one shot in the chamber. But I think Daukaus will finally be able to sort of emerge as one of the elite heavyweight contenders.
One pick separates us on an entire year, and there's people out there that snicker the tee-hee. Complete honesty, go down and look at it. The percentage dropped off a little bit. Well, it dropped off for me. It actually went up for you. But a much larger sample size. There's so many fights this year. And there's one that separates us. So we're different on Eubanks, Gatto, and Lewis Daukaus. And one to make the difference. Derek says, what about Jake Paul Woodley? I guess I'll go with Woodley, but that's just being an MMA guy.
Does this prediction count for the overall?
No,
okay, no. I do think Jake Paul's going to win, oddly enough. Like, no one's going to like this, but I think when you lose, like, your ability to just move forward and throw shots, you never get it back. And I think Woodley's entered that stage of his career. I just don't think he's going to all of a sudden move forward and start throwing punches. How many MMA fights did he go through where we heard this? I'm finally not going to have my back up against the cage.
And then he did against Vicente Luque, and it didn't end all.
Exactly. So I just think that, okay, the one time I was aggressive, I got stopped. And at least when I'm not aggressive, I'm not taking damage. I just think that's kind of his mindset.
Matt, big time fight coming up tonight. Louis Daukaus, Paul Woodley, Deron Williams, Frank Gore, Kaladov, and
I think Joseph Parker could beat Derek Chisora, but here's the thing. Chisora made it a close fight he dropped Joseph Parker in their first fight. So I think I want to see Chisora win because I like him a lot more, but I think Joseph Parker is probably going to win another boring decision.
I've got Parker in that one as well. Matt, so many fights today. So much to look at, so much to pay attention to. Chuck Barkley in the other room sleeping. He is the latest addition to Question Mark Kicks. He is a dog. He is a golden retriever. And he's very young. Matt, I absolutely love this card. I want to thank everybody so much for tuning in, so much for the year that we've had. And make sure you check out some of the wild and wacky stuff that we're going to come out with during the breaks. There's about a month away. If I'm not mistaken, the next UFC card is January 15th, where the records go back to 0-0-0, and we start anew. So I absolutely love it. Make sure you tune in for that content that's out there. It should be a good bit of time away.
Yeah, hopefully everyone enjoys the last fight night of the year. It's kind of wild to say that. And yeah, have a great holiday season. Just have a good time, everyone.
Have a good holiday season. We thank you so much for the participation in the chat. We'll catch you, well, when the new content comes out. And as we always say with Fight Night Picks, let's get into it.
But it's the